Were you the kid who loved to write and was a self proclaimed author by the age of 10? Or were you the kid who struggled to put pen to paper and organize your thoughts as they came out of your head? Unfortunately, a lot of students are discouraged by the writing process because we as teachers may not be offering them the instruction that they really need to be successful. I recently had a chat with an expert in this topic, and I am excited to share our conversation with you today. Welcome to Upper Elementary Simplified, the podcast where busy and overwhelmed teachers find thoughtful ideas to get students engaged in meaningful learning experiences. Hi, I'm Danna Rodebush, former fifth grade classroom teacher and founder of Teacher Tech Studio. I'm here to share practical tips and strategies that will help you grow as an educator. If you are a tired upper elementary teacher searching for ways to cut down your planning time while boosting student engagement, you are in the right spot. Are you ready? Let's simplify. Today's guest is Marianna Monheim of Creatively Comprehensive, and she is here to talk to us today about how to teach writing explicitly and systematically with a focus on teaching revising and editing. Mariana is a former teacher and literacy coach turned private tutor with over 20 years of experience in education. She combs through state and national standards to provide teachers with activities that prepare students for the next grade and beyond. Mariana loves to create resources for upper elementary educators that make adding creativity and choice easy to implement. Let's welcome Mariana to the show. Hi, Mariana. Welcome to the show today. Please tell my audience a little bit about you and how you serve the education community.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today to share about this topic. My name is Marianna, and I create content for upper elementary teachers in my TPT store, Creatively Comprehensive. I like to show teachers how easy it is to create choice-based activities that are highly engaging and motivating. I know it's hard to be in the classroom and stay on top of, everything new that's going on, the current research, and I'm a big nerd, so I like all that stuff. So I try to take what I learn and kind of break it down just like you would for your students. Take something challenging and break it down into digestible chunks.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I love that word digestible chunks. I used to say that word a lot whenever I was teaching long division, break it down into chunks. So that is perfect. I love it. So we know that anytime we are writing a piece of content or a student writes a story or an essay, an integral part of their writing process is revising, which is when we may be rework the text in a way to make it sound better than it does just coming straight out of our heads in the first draft. And then another important part of the writing process is editing, which is when we check for grammatical, punctuation, and spelling errors. So, Mariana, let's start out by talking about why the skills of revising and editing are so important for students to practice and master. Can you tell us about your thoughts around this?
Yeah, so, I'm someone that likes to be a realist. Some people call it being a pessimist, but I consider it being a realist. So, not to be Debbie Downer, but if you look around the world and you see what's popular with students and what's drawing their attention, it's really not writing. So, and that's just kind of a indication of kind of what's going on in our society today. We speak in text talk, we are abbreviating everything. The written word is not highly valued anymore. But writing and communication are so important. And I think sometimes students don't see that connection that writing is communicating through words. They think it's like this chore that we have to do. But, that's kind of like what makes us different than animals. We're able to communicate by speaking and writing, Um, and a lot of students say are just, oh, my teacher needs me to write an essay, or I have to write a response to this, and it seems like a chore. And the things that they are familiar with, like texting and of course YouTube when they're looking at all the comments under the videos, those are not necessarily modeling the grammatical standards that we would like them to apply, right? And of course,
Absolutely.
a lot of them say they want to be content creators, but they don't make the connection that a content creator is also writing, especially if you're getting to the level of, having a lot of subscribers and making money off of it. You have to write content, right?
Absolutely. That is funny. And you're 100% right that a lot of students view writing as a chore, like you said. And so it's not something that they look at as that a life skill that they need, you know? So why do you think that students have so much trouble specifically with revising and editing their writing?
So for a lot of students, they're just not really aware of it. They're not seeing it modeled. It's like a foreign language to them, or you actually do get them to write something down, and then the idea of I have to look at this again, I have to write more. They just, they're done the first time they do it. It's like saying, do you want to go fly a spaceship? Like they're just, it's not something they're understanding. And then, the idea of writing something and making it better, I think, is kind of just very confusing to them. So I think it's important that they understand what revising and editing are and why we do them. What is the purpose of them? Because, they are similar, they get lumped together. But when we look at revising, that's improving readability and clarifying details and whatnot. And then when we look at editing, we're looking at spelling, punctuation, making it easier to read for the reader. So that's like an easy distinction for us to make as teachers, but I think it's hard for kids to understand that. So we really have to be focused and explicit in saying, well, why do we add a sentence here? Or why does this need more details? Why might we need to remove this part or put it somewhere else? We really have to show them how to do that. When we're looking at revising and editing and teaching, we really have to lay it out for them and think about how would you determine there's missing details in the paragraph? How would you decide what punctuation to use? So a lot of teachers will make the mistake of saying, go revise your work. Well, what does that mean? And if you've ever taught, I think second grade is when exclamation marks get included. So like once you teach exclamation points, when you say, oh, go make it more exciting, that just means add an exclamation point to every sentence, or um add more add more detail. Well, I really, 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 really like this. It was so, 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 so much fun. They're not quite sure what to do. And then that leads to frustration on your part. And you're like, oh, I'm never going to get this. They're never going to understand. So just being super explicit at the beginning is going to help them out so much.
That is so funny. I am definitely in the category of teachers who are not really sure how to go about helping students with revising their writing because math was always my thing when I was in the classroom and I love to write. I feel like I'm a good writer myself, but I struggled with teaching writing. And so I think that's funny. And I also, something you said made me think um, whenever we put a piece of content on paper or on the screen and it comes out of our head that first time, it's so funny because kids are like, well, I did it, it's done. And I think a lot of that probably comes from once we get it out of our heads and put it on paper, you're you don't really have anything else to say about it until you go back and look at it and reread it and have someone else read it and you start thinking of details that you can add. So I think that is another thing, that really comes into, well, we need to be sure that we're telling students that and we're modeling that like you said. So do you think that teachers are missing the mark somewhere along the way when attempting to teach these skills?
So, I mean, before we talk about that, we have to talk about just what teaching is right now. We're like all just everyone's trying to survive right now, right? So,
Mm.
I'm tutoring, I'm working with an aftercare program. So I see kids from all over my communities. I talk to my friends that are still teachers. and it's like triage right now. You are getting to whatever is most important first, and you're getting third graders and they don't even know what a sentence is, or they're not
Yes.
writing sentences. So
Mhm.
you have to start where you are. If you're teaching, this is a sentence, it has a capital letter and a period. Revising and editing is something that seems way off in the distant future. And before we talk about individual teachers, you got to talk about the system and what's coming from above. So writing, as part of your ELA block, writing is like the little piece at the end, and for the most part, until you get to the testing grade, which is unfortunate because then those teachers have like this monumental task of getting them to write an essay.
Mhm.
And writing, unfortunately, like you can't bubble in ABCD, so it's not something you can quantify, which means that the people from above that are writing these tests and determining what is on level or whatever, those, they're not able to quantify what writing is easily, so it kind of gets pushed to the side. um
Absolutely. Mhm.
there's only so many hours you have in a day. There's only so much time you have in your reading block. But I would say for teachers, it's important to emphasize like writing is a process, and each part of the process requires the same amount of brain work. It's just as hard to go back and revise and edit as it is to write it in the first place or plan it. So we tend to emphasize the planning and the writing, and we're like, oh, the hard part's done. Now we're just going to go back and check quickly, where it really kind of needs to be like, this is the third step out of four. They're all equally important.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Another thing that we want to look at is the amount of scaffolding we're giving. So I taught gifted high achieving students for a majority of my time. Um, and I would, anytime we started something new, they got a lot of scaffolding, because just because they are maybe above level based on, what our standards are, they still need examples. As adults, we use examples. When I need to figure out how to unclog my sink, I'm not a plumber, so I have to go on YouTube, right? I'm looking for someone to help me. I need something to go off of. I'm not just getting under my sink and pulling things apart. And it's the same with kids. So as we get into upper elementary, I notice as a coach that teachers feel like the scaffolding is like, oh, we're babying them too much, we're babying them too much. And there might come a point where you do need to let them go off on their own, but before that you need to make sure they understand what they're doing, and that's going to require maybe a lot more scaffolding than you think it is. So I was always, as a coach, like, whatever you're doing to scaffold, you need to 10 times that before you can say, okay, you're going to go off and work independently.
Absolutely. I think those are great points. So, when it comes to self editing, what is your position on spelling?
All right, so in a perfect world, they're in K2, they get all their phonics instruction, they're learning all these patterns. They are coming to you in third grade, and they're, able to spell on their own well enough. But we also know, like, this is not a reality right now. We're making strides with science of reading. Most people are on board with it. I'm exclusively tutoring K2 students almost at this point, which is an interesting shift for me. But I can see now like what the value of science of reading is, and I see how much progress they make in a short amount of time. But that you have to work with the kids that are in front of you. And sometimes they just don't have those skills that you're expecting them to have. So, as a fourth grade teacher teaching in Florida, that's the first writing assessment. I would tell my students that you use the tools you have. So if you have a passage in front of you and it's mentioning proper nouns, like if we're talking about Mount Rushmore and it has the president's names, you are able to go and look at the passage and you should be able to spell those things correctly, right? And also, whatever phonics skills you have, you should be using those to sound out the words. I think that's one of those habits. I think it's the hardest habit to break, where they hear the first sound of the word and then they just guess all the letters after it. So really like digging into those syllable skills and focusing on the sounds of each syllable, And then even if it's not correct, like at least I can read it and know where you're going, right? And I would say, like, when students are self-editing, we want to look at their attempts. We don't want to say, even if they're, even if they don't get it right after they're trying, at least they're trying to apply the skill. So without a visual, it's kind of hard to explain, but like the word family, if they start at FAMLE, okay, and then they go back and they think about what they know and they use their skills and they come back with FAMILYS and they don't apply the plural correctly, at least they tried, right? So you can see they made an attempt, they're learning, and with more exposure and more, practice, they're going to get there eventually. And that's more meaningful to them than me just going through with my red pen and be like, wrong, 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 you know?
Right. Exactly. I think that with spelling, I always had a hard time because I am a natural speller and I don't understand a lot of times how somebody can't just look at a word and be like, "Oh, that's not spelled right," you know? And so but I do know, I mean that is a reality, you know. So it's something that we have to take into account. And I think that also goes back to, you know, we have students who are natural writers, you know, they have just, I don't know, something that gives them the creativity and the ability to structure their writing, and that it all kind of comes together there. And it's for those students who don't have that natural skill, it makes it more difficult for them, obviously. And as teachers, we have to be there and have those strategies in place. So, do you think that peer editing is a good strategy for upper elementary students? And talk a little bit about that.
So, like with everything that we talk about, it's very individualized to where are you teaching? What type of environment are you in? How many students do you have? What kind of things do you do? Are you always using that type of strategy, or are you using collaboration a lot in your class? So if you're not, and you're like, hey, go edit each other's papers, neither of them are going to know, what to do. And that's where we get, they get off task and then you get frustrated and then you say, oh, peer editing doesn't work, right? So you have
Mhm.
to you have to make sure like they know what they're doing. And then, if you have a group of students that's, lower, or, the level is not there that you're expecting, you don't want them to just sit there and it's, one lost person guiding another lost person. They're going to need specific instruction from an adult before they can help each other. It is very
Right.
powerful when they can help each other, but they need to, have those tools necessary to do it. And one of the best things is like to have a tracker or checklist so they can stay on topic about what they're doing. And they also understand that it's very objective as we're looking at our friends' work and we're giving them feedback. Because, I was a big collaboration person always. My kids were always working together. So, I would listen to what they're saying. And so, they gave very good advice 90% of the time. And then other times it might be like, well, you wrote about the beach. I don't like going to the beach. So I would change what this is, like that's not helpful. So having a checklist to be like, okay, read through and look for capitals, read through and look for punctuation. That way they know that there's an objective task that they're focused on.
I love that. So we can all benefit from a good checklist for sure. That's funny. So, what are some tips that you can give teachers here at the end of the school year as they continue to build those writing skills in their students? Do you have some suggestions for creative writing and ways to make writing really fun for students as we near the end of the year?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, you are a creative writer. You liked writing. I was the same. I would go home and write something, and my poor teacher would have to read it the next day and be like, "Yay, good job!" It's so funny, like when you're in their shoes and you realize, "Oh my gosh, I was so annoying."
That is hilarious. I love that.
But again, like when we were talking earlier, if kids are not reading, they're not necessarily understanding story structure, right? Yes, they
Mhm.
are watching movies, they're watching 8-second TikTok videos. You're not getting a lot of like plot development. there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you have to like really make sure they understand those three elements, like the bare bones. What is characters, setting, and plot? And when you're talking about characters, it's not, oh, this character is Bob. Bob has to have some details about him. He's Bob. He's 9 years old. He doesn't like spiders. He wears the same lucky shirt every time he takes a test. Like there has to be more to Bob than just his name before you start writing. You can't be coming up with it as you're going along. The same with the
Mm-hmm.
setting. It's not just the classroom. What does it look like? Is there a mural? Are there windows? Can you see a tree outside? Do you have a beautiful library? Is there a carpet? Like we need those details in place before we start writing. And as far as plots, then once you have all that detail about characters and setting, that informs your plot. And with plot, I would say be as simple as possible. Someone has a problem, they try to solve the problem. This is what happened when they tried to solve the problem. Start there. And then you are going to have those kids that are naturally adept writers and they are going to go farther than that. But for the ones that aren't, at least they have a good understanding of what story structure is. And also, I would say creativity, this comes up a lot. I see this on Instagram a lot when anyone is trying to teach writing in a structured way. It's like, oh, but writing is a creative process. It is, but you can't be creative if you don't know what you're doing. You can't build a house without a foundation. You can't just write a bunch of flowery sentences with a lot of adjectives and there's no organization to it. You have to do the bare bones, just like if you're an athlete, you have to get your reps in. You don't just show up and end up in the Super Bowl, from your first football practice. If you're doing anything, you have to be organized before you can be creative, right?
Oh my goodness. And I know that as teachers, we've all seen that writing where it's just kind of like they just, everything that was in their head at that moment ends up on the paper.
Yes.
And, it's funny, but yeah, you are exactly right. I love how you said that you have to have those basic, like you said, the bare bones. You have to have those basics about plot structure to be able to really write a story. Another thing that I always found like fun here at the end of the school year was to just let kids write, just for fun, take that pressure off throughout the school year. They are, we have this essay, we have to take this test or, whatever, but giving them just the freedom to, okay, here is a story prompt, or here is a set of characters, choose one. Here is a set of conflicts, choose one. Here's a set of settings, choose one and write your story, And I actually used to buy these little blank like books and
Mhm.
let them
Target
use
books.
yes, they were so fun.
Yeah,
I know whenever I was a kid, I would have loved that if
I
my
know.
teachers had, allowed me to do that and just take a book and write my own book and everything. And so I think that that's a great idea here at the end of the school year as well. So, what is one piece of advice that you have for teachers listening who are looking to improve their writing instruction in the future?
All right. So, like I said before, I'm a realist. We have to look at what's going on around us. And right now, it might be nice to think, oh, I'm inspiring a class of future authors, but is that really the goal right now? We need to look at, they need to write to communicate, and they also kind of need you to help them make that connection that it's a life skill. It's something you have to do to function. You are going to have to fill out a job interview one day. You might be in the running for a scholarship one day and you need to write an essay. Writing is something that you have to do. Like we say, like reading is taking it in and writing is pouring it out, like it's a reciprocal process. So yes, we want them all to be inspired. And you might have those one or two kids. Like I was one of those kids where, whatever stories we read, I was like, oh, that's amazing. And then I went home and, made my own version of that story. And that's great. But we need everyone to be able to write. So, even I feel like as a tutor, I'm having to do this a lot where I'm saying, it might not be something you like to do, but it's something you have to do. And I think kids appreciate that honesty when you give it to them and they are made to understand that, it's not all about what we love. It's not everything that we want to do. It's about this is going to help us as we get older. This is a skill we need to take with us as we continue through middle and high school. And another thing, again, scaffold, 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 scaffold way more than you think you need to. Feed the baby birds till it's time to leave the nest. There's no timeline with it. It's whatever they need, and eventually they will get it on their own. But hold their hand. It's okay. You're not, I know upper elementary where there's like this constant rush. We have to prepare them for middle school. And it's like they'll be prepared when they get there. It's okay. Like they'll be fine. Right now, you can still treat them like young kids because they are young kids.
I love that. Yes. And as a former fifth grade teacher, I totally am in that boat. Like, well, I've got to get them ready for middle school. I've got to get them ready for sixth grade, but they're still kids. It's just that is very difficult to kind of let go there. And I also love how you mentioned how you need or how teachers need to kind of bring that real life into writing. I've never really thought about it that way. Like I said, I was a math person, I taught writing, I taught literacy, but not for the entire time I was in the classroom. I was mostly math. And I was constantly saying, trying to get the real life, the real world connection for math skills, but I
Mhm.
never really thought about it in the terms that you just said. So I love that where, one day you're going to have to fill out a job application. One day you're going to have to, have an interview for, with your future boss, or you might be a leader of a company and you need to be able to make a speech or whatever, that written communication, that speaking, that oral communication. I think that's all very important. And I love that you said that and kind of bring a new perspective to it for me and hopefully for some of the listeners as well. So, I know that you have some free task cards that I'm going
Mhm.
to be linking in the show notes. Could you talk a little bit about those and what the listeners can expect from that resource?
All right, so there are task cards based on arms for revising and cups for editing, those acronyms. And, they've been around a very long time. I probably used them when I was in school, and I, of course, used them as a teacher. And I think, again, sometimes we think when we hand a checklist and it says arms and it lists all the steps, we think, okay, they've got it. But with these task cards, it kind of stops and has them focus on each part separately, and it gives them things to think about in terms of adding, why are you adding the sentence? What purpose does it serve? Why are you substituting the word good for the word extraordinary? It's giving them that structure and really making them focus on each part of the acronym as one separate thing rather than going through all of it together. And I think, they're perfect for just putting them in a center, having a way to refer back to, and just kind of getting used to continuously doing that each time that they're writing something.
Oh, good. I love that. So, if you're listening, and even though it is here at the end of the school year, you can be, prepping for next school year. Go and check those out. I think that's a great thing to have in your toolkit. So, Mariana, is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't already covered?
I think we pretty much covered it. I would also say, you have to consider attention spans. Writing is a very mentally draining thing. So you want to make sure that, again, I brought up digestible chunks in the beginning, but it really has to be, if you can't have everyone doing every part of this process in one day. You're really going to want to break it up so that they're not overwhelmed, because I was helping a third grader write an essay yesterday. My hand hurts so much. So it's like, it is a lot. They do have to get used to it, like that muscle memory of, writing and do it is a strenuous task. So really be mindful of how much time you spend in one sitting, kind
Mhm.
of going over
That is
it.
Yes, that is so true. That's so true. So, be sure if you're listening, be sure to check out the show notes for Marianna's free task cards. I'm going to be linking those down in the show notes. Marianna, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us about writing instruction. I have really enjoyed our conversation. I guess I got so into my conversation with Marianna that I completely forgot to ask her to share where to find her online because I already know where to find her. Oops, sorry about that, Marianna. So, if you want to connect with Marianna, you can find her on our website at creativelycomprehensive.com. You can find her on Instagram at Creatively Comprehensive. And on TPT, you can also find her at Creatively Comprehensive. I will link all of those locations in the show notes for this episode. I hope that you are able to walk away from listening to this conversation with some new insights about writing instruction. I know I am. Remember to get subscribed to Dog Days Digest to be notified of all of the new issues that are released throughout the summer. Marianna is one of the authors who is featured inside the digest, among many other great friends of mine. I hope to see you back here next week, same time, same place. And until then, have a great week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Upper Elementary Simplified. I hope you are able to take away something useful that will help you grow as a teacher. I do have a quick favor to ask before you go. If you are enjoying the podcast, please let me know by leaving me a review. It really does make a difference because reviews impact search results, which helps me to expand my reach to other educators. Plus, I love to read my listeners' comments. Until next time, keep life simple.